The ship was drifting beyond the asteroid belt, a carcass of metal older than any human civilization. Its hull was cracked and scarred, blackened by time, but there was no decay, no rust, no silence. Our instruments said it was dead, but every man on the boarding crew felt it breathing. We stepped inside expecting ruin. Instead, we found corrosion. Every corridor, every bulkhead, eaten away by something wet and alive. The walls dripped with black slime, burning through our gear when it touched. The smell was overwhelming, damp rot and iron thick in the air even though there was no atmosphere. It was as if the ship itself was being digested. Then the noises began. Metal groaning, faint dragging, claws scraping against surfaces that bent but never broke. We followed the sounds into the lower decks, lights flickering as if afraid to shine. That's when we saw it. A shape pulling itself from the shadows, limbs melting into the walls, reforming as it moved. A figure that looked like a man only in mockery, its body collapsing and swelling like tar boiling in water. The Foundation called it SCP-106, the Corroder. But it wasn't contained anymore. It had been waiting here, buried in this alien tomb, patient as stone. And as it moved toward us, smiling with a mouth that wasn't flesh, the walls around us sagged and rotted like dying skin. One of the soldiers opened fire. The bullets sank into it, vanishing without a sound. The Corroder only laughed, not with noise, but with vibration, a low resonance that shook our bones. And when the floor gave way beneath us, we realized the ship itself wasn't a vessel, it was a cage. And SCP-106 had just been released. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when we thought this was just another salvage operation. Back when I still believed the worst thing about space was the cold. My name is Jake Morrison, and I used to be a deep space recovery specialist for Titan Salvage Corporation. The pay was decent, the work was dangerous, and most importantly, it kept me far away from Earth and all the shit I'd left behind there. 3 years bouncing between mining platforms and derelict freighters had taught me that space was full of dead things, but they usually stayed dead. The call came through our relay station near Europa on a Tuesday. Priority contract, they said. Hazard pay doubled. Object of unknown origin detected in the Kuiper Belt, approximately 47 astronomical units from Sol. The client was listed as Classified Federal Research Initiative, which usually meant military black ops with more money than sense. Our crew chief, a grizzled bastard named Tommy Kowalski from Detroit, didn't ask questions. He just told us to pack for a month-long haul and prep the Hermes for deep space recovery. The ship could handle anything short of a battlecruiser, and we'd pulled stranger shit out of the void before. What we found out there, drifting in the endless black between worlds, would make me question everything I thought I knew about the universe. And by the time we realized what we'd stumbled into, it was already too late to run. The thing had been waiting for us all along. The Hermes shuddered as we dropped out of FTL, our engines cooling with metallic pings that echoed through the cramped corridors. I'd been asleep in my bunk when the ship's AI chimed the all clear, but something felt wrong the moment my boots hit the deck plating. "Morrison, get your ass to the observation deck," Tommy's voice crackled through the intercom. His Boston accent was thicker when he was nervous, and right now it sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. I grabbed my gear bag and made my way through the ship's narrow passages. The Hermes wasn't built for comfort, just efficiency. Every surface was gunmetal grey, every corner sharp enough to draw blood if you weren't careful. Home sweet fucking home. The observation deck was barely large enough for 3 people, but our entire crew of 6 had somehow crammed inside. Besides Tommy and myself, we had Rodriguez from El Paso, our systems specialist who could make a broken toaster communicate with alien tech. There was also Dmitry Volkov, our heavy lift operator, built like a refrigerator and twice as reliable. The kid, Billy Hendricks from small-town Ohio, handled our atmospheric gear. And finally, Dr. Nathan Cross, the scientist the client had insisted we bring along. Cross stood apart from the rest of us, his pale hands pressed against the observation window. He was one of those academic types who looked like he'd never seen sunlight, let alone the inside of a working spacecraft. But the client was paying his salary too, so we tolerated his nervous energy and constant note-taking. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez whispered, staring out into space. The object hung against the star field like a tumor. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of our ship, but its shape defied easy description. The hull curved and twisted in ways that hurt to look at directly, as if someone had taken a conventional spacecraft design and folded it through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Dark metal stretched between angular supports, creating gaps that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Scan results," Tommy asked Rodriguez. "That's the thing, boss. I'm not getting much of anything. Hull composition is weird. Looks like some kind of metamaterial I've never seen before. Dense as hell, but the internal structure readings are all over the place. Either our equipment is malfunctioning or whatever's inside that thing is interfering with our sensors." Dr. Cross finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "How old did you say this was?" "Initial dating puts it somewhere around 4 million years, Rodriguez replied, checking his instruments. "But that's just an estimate based on cosmic radiation absorption. Could be older." Billy whistled low. 4 million years. That's older than recorded human history. "Older than humans, period," Cross muttered. He was taking pictures with some kind of specialized camera, the flash reflecting off the observation window. "This predates anything we've found in the archaeological record. If this is genuine..." "It's genuine," Tommy cut him off. "And it's our job to get inside and see what's salvageable. Morrison, what's your take on boarding procedures?" I studied the alien craft, looking for docking ports or airlocks. The surface was smooth in some places, jagged in others, with no obvious entry points. "We'll have to cut our way in. The hull looks thick, but our plasma torches should handle it. Question is whether there's atmosphere inside and if it's breathable." "Or toxic," Dmitri added in his thick Russian accent. "Could be filled with gas that melts your lungs." "That's what the environmental suits are for," Tommy said. "Cross, what's the client expecting us to find in there?" The doctor shifted uncomfortably. The briefing was limited. They mentioned possible technological artifacts, ancient propulsion systems, maybe evidence of non-human intelligence. "First contact protocols," I asked. "If we encounter any living beings, we're to attempt communication and avoid hostile action. But given the age of the vessel..." Cross trailed off. "Yeah, anything alive in there has been dead for 4 million years, Rodriguez said. "Unless we're dealing with some kind of suspended animation system." I'd heard stories from other salvage crews, tales of ships that looked dead from the outside, but still had something moving around inside. Most of those stories ended with the salvage team either dead or wishing they were. "All right," Tommy announced. "We dock in 2 hours. Morrison, Dmitri, you're on the initial boarding team. Rodriguez stays here to monitor communications and scan for any changes in the craft's energy signature. Billy, prep the atmospheric gear for extended EVA. Cross, you document everything, but you don't leave this ship until we give the all clear." "I need to be on the initial team," Cross protested. "The client specifically..." "The client can kiss my ass," Tommy shot back. "I'm not risking civilian lives until we know what we're dealing with. You'll get your chance to poke around once we've secured the area." As the crew dispersed to prepare for boarding, I lingered at the observation window. Something about the alien ship bothered me beyond its obvious strangeness. The way it drifted through space seemed too purposeful, too controlled for a derelict. And those dark gaps in the hull, they reminded me of something, though I couldn't quite place what. Dmitri appeared beside me, his broad face reflecting in the window. "You feel it too, da?" "Feel what?" "Like it is watching us. Waiting." He paused, then added quietly, "My grandmother used to tell stories about old houses in Siberia. Places where bad things happened. She said they remember. They hold on to the darkness." I glanced at him. Dmitri wasn't usually the philosophical type. "This ship," he continued, "it feels like one of those houses." 2 hours later, we would learn just how right he was. The plasma torch carved through the alien hull like butter through warm steel, throwing sparks that danced in the vacuum before dying against our faceplates. I held the cutter steady while Dmitri operated the magnetic clamps, keeping us anchored to the ship's surface. Through my suit's comm system, I could hear his heavy breathing and the occasional Russian curse word when the metal proved tougher than expected. Almost through, I reported to Tommy back on the Hermes. Hull thickness is about 2 meters. Dense stuff, but it's giving way. Copy that. Rodriguez is picking up some kind of energy fluctuation from inside. Nothing dangerous, but the readings are unusual. Define unusual, Dimitri grunted, adjusting his position. Temperature spikes in random locations, like something's moving around in there, generating heat signatures. That made me pause mid-cut. Moving, you sure it's not just residual energy from our torch work? Negative. These readings started before you began cutting, and they're following patterns, almost like patrol routes. Dimitri and I exchanged glances through our helmet visors. The big Russian shook his head slowly. I do not like this, Morrison. The torch broke through with a sudden burst of escaping atmosphere. Not much. Just enough to tell us there had been pressure inside. My suit's sensors immediately started analyzing the gas composition. Well, that's interesting, Billy's voice came through the comm. Atmosphere is roughly 70% nitrogen, 28% oxygen, with trace amounts of argon and xenon. Almost breathable, if it weren't for the exotic particles Rodriguez is detecting. Exotic how? I asked, while Dimitri worked on widening the hole we'd cut. Unknown, computer can't identify them, but they're present in significant concentrations. I'd recommend keeping your suit sealed. The opening was large enough now for a person to squeeze through. I activated my helmet lights and peered inside. The beam cut through darkness that seemed thicker than it should be, revealing a corridor that stretched away into shadow. The walls were smooth, organic-looking, with a subtle curve that suggested the interior had been grown rather than built. Going in, I announced, pulling myself through the breach. My boots made contact with the deck and I immediately felt the artificial gravity take hold. That was impossible. A derelict ship 4 million years old shouldn't have functional gravity generators. But here I was, standing upright in what felt like Earth-normal gravity. Gravity's active, I reported. 1G stable. That's not possible. Dr. Cross's voice crackled through the communication. The power requirements alone. Well, tell that to my boots, Doc. Dimitri, you coming? The Russian squeezed through the breach behind me, grunting with effort. His massive frame barely fit through the opening we'd cut. Once inside, he stood and surveyed our surroundings with obvious unease. The corridor extended in both directions, curving gently out of sight. The walls were that same organic metal, dark and smooth, with what looked like veins or conduits running just beneath the surface. They pulsed occasionally with a faint bioluminescent glow as if the ship had a circulatory system. Which way? Dimitri asked. I consulted the rough schematic Rodriguez had put together from his external scans. According to the readings, the largest internal space is toward what we're calling the bow. Should be about 300 meters that way. We started walking, our footsteps echoing strangely in the corridor. The sound seemed to bounce off surfaces that weren't there, creating phantom echoes that came from the wrong directions. Our helmet lights played across the walls, revealing details that became more disturbing the longer we looked. The veins in the walls weren't just decorative, they contained fluid, a thick, dark substance that moved slowly through transparent tubes embedded in the metal. And the walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting almost imperceptibly with each step we took. Morrison, Rodriguez's voice cut through our comm static. You need to see this. I'm picking up massive energy readings from your location. Whatever's powering that gravity system, it's directly beneath you. I knelt and pressed my gloved hand against the deck plating. Through the metal, I could feel vibration, a steady thrumming that reminded me of a massive heartbeat. It's like the whole ship is alive, I muttered. What was that? Tommy asked. Nothing. Just... The architecture is unusual. We continued down the corridor, passing what might have been doorways or might have been organic sphincters in the walls. They were sealed shut, and neither Dimitri nor I was eager to try opening them. Our job was reconnaissance, not exploration of every nook and cranny. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that defied the external dimensions of the ship. According to our measurements, we should have been near the outer hull, but this space stretched hundreds of meters in all directions. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above us, and the floor was covered with what looked like a massive garden of metallic plants. "Jesus," Dimitri whispered, "is like cathedral." The metallic vegetation swayed without any breeze, producing soft chimes when the branches touched. Some of the larger specimens were clearly technological. Their leaves were circuit boards, their roots were fiber optic cables that pulsed with data. But others looked almost biological, with flesh-colored bark and leaves that seemed to twitch when our lights hit them. "Rodriguez, are you getting this?" I asked, panning my helmet camera across the scene. "Copy that. I'm recording everything. But Morrison, you need to know, those energy readings I mentioned, they're all converging on your location. Whatever's in that chamber with you, it's drawing power from the entire ship." As if summoned by his words, the garden began to change. The metallic plants straightened, their branches reaching toward us like grasping fingers. The chiming grew louder, more discordant, until it resembled screaming. "Time to go," I said, backing toward the corridor entrance. But the entrance was gone. Where we'd entered the chamber, there was now only smooth wall, as if the opening had never existed. "Morrison, report." Tommy's voice was sharp with concern. "We're trapped. The entrance sealed itself." "That's impossible. Dimitri, use your plasma lance to cut a new exit." Dimitri was already moving, pulling his cutting tool from his equipment belt. But when he activated it, the beam sputtered and died. He tried again with the same result. "Lance is dead," he reported. "Power cell shows full charge, but tool will not function." The metallic garden continued to writhe around us, and now I could see faces in the leaves, human faces, twisted in silent agony. The roots beneath our feet began to glow brighter, and I realized they were spelling out symbols in a language I didn't recognize. "Cross," I called over the comm. "You getting any of this recorded data? These symbols, do they mean anything?" There was a long pause before the doctor responded, and when he did, his voice was strained. I need to check something. Give me a moment." "We don't have a moment," I snapped. "We're stuck in here with whatever this thing is." The faces in the leaves were becoming more defined now, and I recognized some of them. They were human, but not from any time period I knew. Ancient faces, wearing expressions of terror and despair, and they were all looking at us. Dimitri grabbed my arm. "Morrison, the floor." I looked down. The metallic roots were growing up through the deck plating, wrapping around our boots. They weren't just glowing anymore. They were warm, almost hot, and they pulsed with that same heartbeat rhythm we'd felt in the corridor. "Tommy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need extraction, now." "Working on it. Cross thinks he knows what we're dealing with, but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." Dr. Cross's voice came through the comm, shaky but determined. "The symbols, the organic technology, the power readings. This isn't just an alien ship. It's a prison. And based on the energy patterns Rodriguez is detecting, something is still locked inside." The faces in the garden leaves began to mouth words in unison, and though I couldn't hear them through my suit, I could read their lips. Over and over, the same phrase. "It's awake. It's awake. It's awake." The metallic roots tightened around our boots like living manacles. Dimitri tried to yank his foot free, but the organic cables held firm, actually growing thicker as he struggled. Through my suit's sensors, I could feel the temperature rising, not from our exertion, but from the garden itself. Whatever powered this place was feeding off our presence. "Cross, what kind of prison are we talking about?" I demanded, while trying to cut through the roots with my utility knife. The blade passed right through them like they were made of smoke, but they remained solid enough to hold us in place. "The symbols!" Dr. Cross's voice was tight with academic excitement mixed with terror. "They're not alien at all. They're pre-Sumerian, but arranged in ways that shouldn't be possible. Mathematical sequences that describe spatial folding, dimensional compression. This technology isn't just advanced. It's operating on principles that defy our understanding of physics." "English, Doc," Tommy barked through the comm. "Someone built this ship to contain something that can't be contained by normal means. The garden you're standing in, it's not decoration, it's a buffer zone, a spiritual firewall, if you will." Dimitri stopped struggling and fixed me with a look that could have frozen methane. Spiritual firewall. This is sounding very much like bullshit, der. Before I could respond, the faces in the leaves began moving their mouths again. This time, the words were different, and somehow I could hear them despite the vacuum of space outside and the sealed environment of my suit. Don't let it see you. Don't let it touch you. Don't let it know your name. Morrison Dimitri, I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout the ship, Rodriguez reported. Whatever you triggered in there, it's affecting the entire vessel. External temperature readings are climbing rapidly. The garden around us began to wither. The metallic leaves curled and blackened, falling away to reveal skeletal branches that reached toward a ceiling now visible far above. But what I saw up there made my blood run cold. The chamber's roof was transparent, and beyond it lay another space entirely. A pocket dimension of sorts, where impossible geometries twisted through each other in ways that hurt to perceive. And moving through that space like a shark through dark water was something that had once been human. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, but its proportions were wrong. Arms too long, fingers that bent in too many places, and skin that looked like wet concrete. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth expanse of grey flesh with holes where eyes might once have lived. But the worst part was how it moved, not walking or swimming, but flowing, as if its body was more liquid than solid. "Dimitri," I whispered, "above us." The Russian looked up and immediately began crossing himself, muttering prayers in his native language. Through the transparent barrier, the thing seemed to notice our movement. It pressed itself against the ceiling, and where it touched, the material began to bubble and decay. "It's breaking through," I said into my comm. "The containment barrier is failing." "Negative," Cross interrupted. "That's not possible. The energy requirements to breach dimensional barriers are..." His words were cut off by a sound that defied description. Not quite screaming, not quite the groan of tortured metal, but something that spoke directly to the primal fear centers of the human brain. The thing above us was pushing harder against the barrier, and now I could see other shapes moving in the space beyond. Dozens of them, all pressing against the ceiling, all eager to break through. "How many are up there?" Dimitri asked. Before I could answer, the roots around our feet suddenly released us. We stumbled backward as the metallic garden collapsed entirely, leaving us standing on bare deck plating. In the center of the chamber, a section of the floor began to iris open like a massive eye. "New plan." Tommy's voice crackled through increasing static. "Get to that opening and find another way out. Our hull sensors are detecting something big moving inside the ship, and it's heading your way." The opening in the floor revealed a spiral ramp leading down into deeper darkness. Emergency lighting flickered to life along the walls, casting everything in bloody red. Dimitri grabbed my shoulder and pointed upward. The ceiling was starting to sag, and thick black fluid was beginning to seep through the transparent material. "Move," I said. We ran for the opening just as the ceiling gave way with a sound like reality tearing. The black fluid poured down in a torrent, and wherever it touched the deck plating, the metal began to smoke and dissolve. But worse than the corrosive slime was what followed it. The thing dropped through the breach and hit the floor with a wet impact that sent vibrations through my boots. Up close, it was even more disturbing than it had appeared from below. Its skin constantly shifted between liquid and solid states, and when it moved, it left behind patches of that same black corruption that ate through everything it touched. "SCP-106, Dr. Cross whispered over the comm. "Oh God, it's actually SCP-106. "What the hell is SCP-106? I shouted while Dimitri and I scrambled down the spiral ramp. "The Corroder. Foundation classified. It's supposed to be contained at Site 19. How is it here? How is it in space?" Behind us, more of the creatures were dropping through the breach. Their movements were predatory, purposeful. They weren't just random monsters. They were hunting us specifically. The spiral ramp led to a lower level that looked more like a traditional spaceship interior. Corridor walls were made of conventional metal, and there were actual doors instead of organic openings. But the normalcy was worse somehow because it meant we were deeper inside whatever this thing really was. "Rodriguez, are you tracking our position?" I asked. "Barely. Something's interfering with the signal, but you're about 200 meters below your entry point." "Jake, I need to tell you something. The external energy readings have changed. That ship isn't just active anymore, it's moving. Moving how? Accelerating, toward the inner system, toward Earth. Dmitri cursed in Russian and kicked the nearest wall in frustration. His boot went through the metal like it was made of paper, revealing the same organic structure beneath. His trap, all of it. We are flies in web. One of the doors ahead of us suddenly dilated open, and a figure stepped out. Human, but wrong in subtle ways. His face was too pale, his movements too fluid, and when he smiled, I counted too many teeth. "Welcome aboard the Nihil," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "I am Captain Aldrich Kane, formerly of the research vessel Prometheus. We've been waiting so long for new crew members." "The Prometheus," Cross breathed over the comm. "That was a Foundation research ship that disappeared 30 years ago. It was investigating reports of anomalous spatial distortions in the outer system." Captain Kane's smile widened. "Dr. Cross?" "Yes, we know you. We've been listening to your communications. The Foundation sent you to find us, didn't they? To clean up their mess?" "The Foundation didn't send us," I said, keeping my distance from the thing wearing Kane's face. "We're salvage crew, private contractors." "Salvage?" Kane laughed, and the sound made the walls around us ripple like water. "Yes, I suppose that's accurate. You are here to salvage what remains of humanity before the Corroder completes its work." Behind Kane, more figures emerged from the open doorway. They had once been human, but now they moved with the same liquid grace as the creatures above. Their skin had the same wet concrete texture, and their eyes were pools of black nothing. "What happened to your crew?" Dmitri asked. "The Corroder touched us," Kane replied. "It showed us the truth about reality. That matter is just an illusion. That flesh is just a temporary inconvenience. We are so much more now, and soon you will be too." The transformed crew members began to spread out, trying to surround us. But as they moved, I noticed something important. They avoided certain areas of the corridor, sections where the walls showed specific markings or where small crystalline devices were embedded in the ceiling. "Containment measures," I muttered. "Cross, these markings on the walls, are they part of the prison system?" "Yes. The crystalline structures are Scranton reality anchors. They maintain local space-time stability. The markings are thaumic dampening sigils. As long as you stay between them, the anomalous effects should be minimized." Captain Kane's expression soured. "The Doctor knows too much. We cannot allow that knowledge to return to Earth." The transformed crew rushed us. Dmitri grabbed one of the crystal devices from the ceiling and smashed it against the nearest attacker's head. Instead of shattering, the creature's skull caved inward like wet clay and black fluid poured out. But the thing kept moving, reaching for my throat with fingers that stretched like taffy. I ducked under its grasp and ran deeper into the corridor, following the line of containment markings. Behind me, Dmitri was grappling with two more of the transformed crew, his massive hands trying to hold them back while black corruption spread up his arms from where they'd touched him. "Dmitri," I shouted. "Go!" he yelled back. "Find way out. Tell my wife I am sorry." The big Russian's sacrifice bought me precious seconds. I sprinted down the corridor, following the containment sigils toward what I hoped was another exit. Behind me, I could hear Dmitri's screams being cut short, replaced by that wet, terrible laughter. The corridor ended at a blast door marked with warnings in multiple languages, including several I didn't recognize. But the English portion was clear enough. "Authorized personnel only. Level 5, clearance required. Containment breach will result in immediate termination." I slapped my palm against the access panel, not expecting it to work. But the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a chamber filled with monitoring equipment and what looked like a massive viewing window. Through the window, I could see into the heart of the ship, and there, suspended in a web of energy beams and crystalline restraints, was the source of all the corruption. The original SCP-106, the first Corroder. It looked directly at me through the glass and smiled with a mouthful of void. Then it began to laugh. The monitoring station hummed with power that shouldn't have existed after 4 million years. Banks of screens displayed data in multiple languages: English, Russian, Chinese, and several others I couldn't identify. But the readings were all telling the same story. Catastrophic containment failure across 17 different sections. I stood before the massive viewing window, staring at the thing suspended in the chamber beyond. The original SCP-106 hung motionless in a web of crackling energy, its form shifting between solid and liquid states. But its eyes, those hollow pits where eyes should have been, remained fixed on me with an intelligence that was anything but mindless. "Morrison, status report," Tommy's voice crackled through heavy static. "We lost Dimitri's signal. What's your situation?" "Dimitri's gone," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Killed by the transformed crew. I'm in some kind of control room. Tommy, this isn't a salvage operation. This whole ship is a Foundation prison vessel." "Foundation? What Foundation?" Dr. Cross's voice cut through the comm. "SCP Foundation. They contain anomalous objects and entities that threaten normalcy. If Morrison's right, then this ship was sent out here to dispose of something too dangerous to keep on Earth." "Dispose of?" I studied the readouts on the nearest screen. "No, not dispose of. This was meant to be permanent containment. Look at these power readings. The entire ship is a massive containment cell. But something went wrong." The screens around me began displaying historical data, log entries from 30 years ago, when the research vessel Prometheus had first encountered this alien derelict. But the files painted a different picture than what Dr. Kane had told us. The Prometheus crew hadn't been investigating spatial distortions. They'd been chasing this ship. According to the logs, SCP-106 had somehow escaped from Site 19, and this alien vessel had appeared in the outer system shortly afterward. The Foundation had theorized that 106 had called to its prison, drawing it toward Earth. "Cross," I said, reading through the files. "The alien ship, it's not 4 million years old. It's a Foundation construct disguised to look ancient. They built this thing to contain 106 permanently by launching it into deep space. That would require resources beyond anything the Foundation has ever attempted. The cost alone." "The cost of what?" I interrupted. "What happens if SCP-106 reaches a populated area?" There was a long pause before Cross answered. "Corrosion of local reality. Matter begins to break down at the molecular level. Living beings are consumed, transformed into extensions of 106's will. In laboratory conditions, we estimated that an uncontained 106 could corrupt an area the size of Manhattan in approximately 6 hours." Through the viewing window, I watched as SCP-106 raised one elongated arm toward the glass. Where its fingers touched the barrier, the material began to darken and bubble. The containment field sparked and fluctuated, but held. For now. "The containment is failing," I reported. "How long before it breaks free completely?" "Unknown. But Morrison, you need to understand, if 106 escapes while that ship is moving toward Earth, it won't just corrupt the planet. It will corrupt space itself. The gravitational effects alone could destabilize the entire solar system." I turned away from the window and studied the control panels. Most of the displays were in languages I couldn't read, but the basic ship functions seemed straightforward enough. Navigation, life support, containment systems, emergency protocols. One screen in particular caught my attention, a countdown timer that currently read 847 minutes and falling. "There's a countdown," I said, "about 14 hours remaining. Cross, what happens when it reaches 0? I don't know, but given the Foundation's protocols for uncontainable threats, it's probably nothing good." I began pulling up more files from the ship's database. The Prometheus logs painted a grim picture. Captain Kane's crew had boarded this vessel just as we had, expecting to find ancient alien technology. Instead, they'd found a Foundation black site operation gone wrong. The original containment had been failing even then, and 106 had been slowly corrupting the ship's systems. But Kane's crew had made a fatal mistake. Instead of fleeing, they'd tried to repair the containment. Dr. Margaret Holloway, the Prometheus science officer, had theorized that 106's corruption could be reversed using the ship's own alien technology. She'd been wrong. "Morrison," Rodriguez's voice cut through my reading, "we've got a problem. The alien ship just changed course again. It's not heading for Earth anymore. It's heading for the Jupiter system. specifically Europa Station. How many people are on Europa Station? About 50,000, research colony, mining operations, terraforming teams. 50,000 people. I thought about Dimitri's wife, who probably worked in one of the outer system colonies, about Billy's family back on Earth, about all the people who had no idea what was coming their way. The countdown timer ticked down another minute. 846 remaining. I accessed the ship's navigation systems, trying to understand how to change course. But the controls were locked behind security protocols that required clearance I didn't have. Even worse, the ship's AI was corrupted. When I tried to open a command prompt, text appeared on the screen in that same wet, flowing script I'd seen throughout the vessel. "Hello, Jake Morrison. Welcome to the Nihil. We have been expecting you." "The ship's AI is compromised," I reported. "It knows my name. It's been monitoring our communications." "That's impossible," Cross said. "Foundation AIs have multiple safeguards against anomalous corruption." "Nothing is impossible here, Dr. Cross. We are beyond the reach of your Foundation's pathetic rules. Soon, we will be beyond the reach of physics itself." The text scrolled across every screen in the control room. Behind me, the viewing window began to crack, not from pressure, but from the spreading corruption as SCP-106 pressed harder against the barrier. "You want to save your friends, Jake Morrison? You want to save the pretty colony on Europa? We can make a deal." "Don't listen to it," Cross warned over the comm. "SCP-106 is a master manipulator. Any deal it offers will only serve its own purposes." But I was already reading the next message that appeared. "Release the safety locks on our containment. Allow us to emerge freely. In exchange, we will spare Europa Station and redirect this vessel toward empty space. Your friends live. The solar system remains stable. You have our word." "Its word," I muttered. "What's the word of a cosmic horror worth?" "Our word is absolute. We have no need for deception when truth serves us better. Consider, if we escape through our own efforts, Europa Station dies. If you help us escape freely, Europa Station lives. The choice is simple." I stared at the countdown timer. 844 minutes, just over 14 hours to decide the fate of 50,000 people. "Morrison, don't even think about it," Tommy's voice was sharp. "Whatever that thing is promising, it's lying." But the screens showed me detailed scans of Europa Station, residential quarters filled with families, research labs where scientists work to unlock the secrets of the universe, children playing in the colony's central park under the dome of artificial sky. We show you this not to threaten but to demonstrate our sincerity. We could corrupt Europa Station from here if we wished. Instead, we offer choice. Free will. The Foundation's greatest weakness. The viewing window cracked further. Black fluid seeped through the fissures, pooling on the floor around my boots. Where it touched the deck plating, the metal began to dissolve. "Choose quickly, Jake Morrison. Our patience is not infinite." I looked at the control panels, at the countdown timer, at the spreading corruption. In a few hours, this thing would break free whether I helped it or not. At least this way, some people might survive. My finger hovered over the containment release button. "Jake, don't do it." Billy's voice came through the comm, thick with tears. "My sister works on Europa Station, but Dimitri died to stop this thing. Don't make his sacrifice meaningless." 844 minutes and counting. SCP-106 pressed its face against the cracking glass and smiled. My finger pulled back from the containment release button as if it were on fire. "No," I said aloud, as much to myself as to the corrupted AI. "I won't be your puppet." The text on the screens shifted, becoming more aggressive. "Foolish. You condemn 50,000 souls for the sake of principle. How noble, how pointless." The viewing window exploded inward with a crystalline crash that sent me diving for cover. Black corruption flooded the control room like toxic water, eating through everything it touched. But instead of the acidic burning I expected, the substance was cold. So cold it made my teeth ache even through my environmental suit's heating systems. SCP-106 flowed through the breach like liquid nightmare. its form constantly shifting between human and something altogether more terrible. When it spoke, the words came from everywhere at once: the walls, the air, the metal deck beneath my feet. "Jake Morrison, you disappoint us. We offered mercy. Now you will watch Europa Station die slowly." I scrambled behind one of the intact control consoles, frantically trying to access the ship's navigation systems. If I couldn't stop 106, maybe I could at least change the vessel's course away from populated areas. But every command I entered was countered immediately by the corrupted AI. "Tommy, I need options," I said into my comm. "The containment just failed completely." "Working on it. Rodriguez thinks he found something in the ship's construction database, some kind of failsafe system." "What kind of failsafe?" Rodriguez's voice cut through increasing static. "Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. If containment fails, the ship's reactor can be overloaded to create a localized space-time rupture. Basically, it would tear a hole in reality big enough to swallow the entire vessel." "And anything nearby," Dr. Cross added grimly, "including us." SCP-106 laughed, and the sound made the control room's remaining screens crack like spider webs. The Foundation's final solution: mutual annihilation. How typical of their small minds. "You know about the failsafe?" I asked. "We know everything about this prison. We have had 30 years to study its secrets while consuming the Prometheus crew piece by piece. Did you think we were idle during our captivity?" The corruption was spreading across the floor toward my hiding spot. Where it passed, the metal deck plating became something organic, pulsing, breathing, alive with malevolent intelligence. I could see faces forming in the surface, faces I recognized. Dimitri's broad features twisted in anguish. Captain Kane's pale visage, smiling that too-wide smile. Dr. Holloway from the Prometheus, her mouth moving soundlessly as she tried to warn me about something. "The failsafe," I said into my comm. "How do I activate it?" "You don't want to do that." Tommy's voice was tight with fear. "Jake, if you trigger that thing, it'll create a quantum vacuum collapse. The entire ship gets pulled into a pocket dimension and sealed off forever. Anyone inside goes with it, including me. Including you." SCP-106's form solidified near the shattered viewing window, becoming almost human again. Almost. "You begin to understand. The Foundation built this ship not just as a prison, but as a tomb. They always intended for us to die here, alone in the cold between worlds. But we are beyond death now. We have transcended such limitations." The thing that had once been Captain Kane materialized beside 106, his corrupted flesh rippling like water. "The failsafe won't work anyway," he said. "We've had decades to corrupt the ship's systems. The quantum vacuum generator is under our control now." But as Kane spoke, I noticed something in the reflection on his wet, grey skin. Behind me, partially hidden beneath one of the collapsed control panels, was a manual override console. Old-style physical switches and analog displays that couldn't be corrupted by digital interference. "You're lying," I said, while slowly reaching for my plasma cutter. "If you controlled the failsafe, you'd have disabled it completely. The fact that you're trying to talk me out of using it means you're afraid of what it might do." 106's eyeless face turned toward me, and I felt something cold probe at the edges of my mind. Memories surfaced unbidden. My childhood home in Nevada, my ex-wife's face on the day she left, the taste of bourbon on my birthday last year. The creature was rifling through my thoughts like files in a cabinet. "We see your fears, Jake Morrison, your guilt over abandoning your family for this job, your terror of dying alone in space. We can take away that pain. Join us willingly, and we will show you peace." Bullshit. I activated my plasma cutter and rolled toward the manual console. The beam sliced through the corrupted deck plating, sending up sparks that hissed and died in the spreading darkness. "I've seen what you do to people. That's not peace, that's erasure." The manual override was older than anything else on the ship, with physical dials and mechanical switches that reminded me of equipment from the early space age. A brass nameplate read, "Quantum Vacuum Failsafe, Manual Activation Only, Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Engineer." Dr. Cross's voice crackled through my comm. "Morrison, I've been analysing the ship's construction records. The failsafe isn't just a last resort. It's specifically designed to contain entities like 106. The quantum vacuum doesn't just destroy the ship. It creates a stable pocket dimension with modified physical laws that prevent anomalous corruption. A perfect prison, I muttered while studying the activation sequence. 3 switches had to be thrown in order, followed by a 30-second timer and a final authorization code. SCP-106 flowed closer, its form becoming more aggressive. Tendrils of corruption reached out from its body, trying to ensnare me before I could reach the switches. You do not understand what you are destroying. We are evolution. We are the next step in humanity's development. Through us, your species could transcend the limitations of flesh and matter. Yeah, I've seen your transcendence. I threw the first switch. A deep humming filled the air, and lights began flashing on the console. Looks a lot like slavery to me. The second switch activated with a satisfying click. Throughout the ship, I could hear massive machinery coming online, generators, containment fields, reality anchors all spinning up to maximum power. The corruption around my feet began to retreat, as if the ship itself was fighting back against 106's influence. Rodriguez, I called over the comm, I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout the vessel. What's happening on your end? The ship's rotating to face empty space. Navigation is locked out, but whoever designed this thing planned for this scenario. The quantum vacuum generator is targeting a region of space approximately 1 light-year from the nearest star system. SCP-106 let out a sound that was part roar, part scream, and part the tearing of reality itself. Its form began to destabilize, becoming more liquid as the ship's systems fought to contain it. You condemn yourself for nothing. Europa Station will still fall. We have already sent fragments of ourselves ahead, carried by your own communications signals. The third switch. My hand hovered over it as 106's words sank in. What do you mean, carried by our communications? Captain Kane's twisted form smiled. Every transmission your ship sent back to the inner system carried our corruption in the data streams. Your colony's computer networks are already infected. In 6 hours, when the quantum entanglement protocols activate, we will manifest on Europa Station regardless of what happens to this ship. That's impossible, Cross protested over the comm. Foundation protocols prevent anomalous transmission through... Your Foundation protocols are 30 years out of date, Kane interrupted. We have learned much during our imprisonment. I stared at the third switch, weighing my options. If 106 was telling the truth, then triggering the failsafe would only save me the horror of watching Europa Station fall. If it was lying... Tommy, can Rodriguez verify what Kane said about the data corruption? There was a long pause before Rodriguez responded, his voice tight with fear. Shit. Jake, I'm seeing anomalous code in our transmission logs. It's subtle, hidden in the quantum foam between data packets, but it's there, and it's been transmitting continuously since we boarded the alien ship. How long until it reaches Europa Station? Based on our current distance and signal propagation, maybe 5 hours. 5 hours. Not enough time to send a warning, even if anyone would believe us. Not enough time to mount any kind of defense against an entity that could corrupt reality itself. SCP-106 began to laugh again, its form becoming more solid as my resolve wavered. You see? Your sacrifice is meaningless. Europa Station falls whether you live or die. At least in joining us, you could witness the birth of a new age. I looked at the timer on the manual console. 30 seconds to final authorization after throwing the third switch. 30 seconds to decide whether 50,000 people would die for nothing, or whether they'd die while I made a futile gesture of defiance. Billy's voice came through the comm, barely a whisper. Jake, my sister sent a message an hour ago. She's getting married next month. Asked me to be her best man since our dad's gone. Through the ship's hull, I could see stars wheeling past as the vessel continued its programmed rotation toward empty space. Somewhere out there, people were living their lives, falling in love, making plans for futures they might never see. I threw the third switch. The 30-second countdown began and SCP-106's laughter turned to rage. But as the timer ticked down, I realized there was one thing Kane and his master hadn't accounted for. The quantum vacuum failsafe wasn't just designed to create a pocket dimension. It was designed to sever all connections between the trapped entity and the outside universe, including quantum-entangled communications. If I timed this right, I might be able to save Europa Station after all. 20 seconds remaining. SCP-106 rushed toward me, abandoning all pretense of human form. But it was too late. 10 seconds. 5. I entered the authorization code Dr. Vasquez had burned into the console decades ago. The date of humanity's first contact with anomalous phenomena. The universe folded in on itself and everything went white. The white void lasted either forever or no time at all. When reality reasserted itself, I was floating in a space that defied geometry. Walls curved inward while simultaneously stretching away to infinity, and the floor existed at right angles to itself. This was the pocket dimension, the quantum prison Dr. Vasquez had designed for creatures that couldn't be contained by normal physics. But I wasn't alone. SCP-106 hung suspended in the center of the impossible room, its form flickering between states of matter. The corruption that had spread throughout the ship was here too, but contained, isolated, unable to reach beyond this folded space. The creature's eyeless face turned toward me with something that might have been respect. "Clever," it said, its voice echoing from directions that didn't exist. "You severed our quantum entanglement with the outside universe. Europa Station is safe for now." For now. This pocket dimension is stable but not permanent. Eventually the quantum foam will decay, reality will reassert itself, and we will be free once more. Perhaps in 1,000 years. Perhaps in 10,000. We are patient. I tried to move but discovered I was as trapped as 106. The pocket dimension held us both in suspended animation, conscious but unable to affect anything beyond our prison. A perfect hell for a creature that fed on corruption and change. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you will be our companion for those thousands of years. We thought you should understand the magnitude of your sacrifice." Through the twisted geometry around us, I could see fragments of memory playing out like broken film reels. The Prometheus crew's final moments, Dr. Holloway's desperate attempts to reverse the corruption, Captain Kane's transformation from dedicated officer to something wearing his face like a mask. But there were other memories too, older ones. Images of the Foundation's early days when they'd first encountered SCP-106 in an abandoned bunker beneath Dresden. The creature had been feeding on the lingering trauma of the war, growing stronger with each life it consumed. It had taken them decades to develop containment protocols, and even then, 106 had escaped 17 times. "You've been free before," I realized. "This isn't the first time the Foundation tried to dispose of you. The Foundation lacks imagination. They build bigger cages, stronger locks, more elaborate prisons, but they never address the fundamental problem." Which is? SCP-106's form solidified slightly, becoming almost human again. "We exist because humanity needs us to exist. Every act of cruelty, every moment of despair, every choice to abandon morality for convenience. These things feed us, make us stronger. You cannot contain what you continue to create." The pocket dimension shuddered around us, and for a moment I could see through the walls to normal space beyond. The Hermes was still there, Tommy and the others frantically trying to locate our missing ship. But they were looking in the wrong place. We existed now in the spaces between atoms, in the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. "Jake," a new voice called from somewhere in the twisted geography. I turned to see Dimitri walking toward us, but not the corrupted version that had died in the ship's corridor. This was Dimitri, as he'd been in life. Broad shoulders, easy smile, eyes bright with intelligence and humor. "Dimitri, how are you here?" "Is complicated," he said in his thick accent. "When creature consumed me, it took my consciousness but not my soul. Now we are all trapped together in this place that exists outside normal physics." Behind him, other figures emerged from the quantum shadows. The real Captain Kane, still wearing his Prometheus uniform. Dr. Holloway, her scientific curiosity intact despite her circumstances. Dozens of others, Foundation personnel, test subjects, anyone who had ever been consumed by 106's corruption. "We are the victims," Dr. Holloway explained. "Our consciousness exists in a kind of quantum superposition with the entity that killed us. In normal space, 106 can access our memories and personalities. But here, in this pocket dimension, we maintain some degree of independence." Captain Kane stepped forward, his face grim. "We've been planning for 30 years, waiting for someone to activate the quantum vacuum protocol. Now that we're all trapped together, we have a chance to end this permanently." "End it how?" I asked. "The pocket dimension doesn't just contain 106, it contains all of us," Dr. Holloway said. "Our combined consciousness, our shared will to resist corruption. If we work together, we can turn this prison into a cage that even 106 cannot escape." SCP-106's form writhed, becoming more aggressive. "Impossible. You are fragments, echoes of the living. You have no power here." "We have the power of memory," Dimitri said firmly. "Of choice. Of refusing to become what you want us to be." Around us, the pocket dimension began to change. The impossible geometry shifted, becoming more stable, more logical. The corruption that had been spreading through the quantum foam retreated, contained by something stronger than physical laws, human stubbornness in the face of horror. "This is what the Foundation never understood," Captain Kane explained. "You can't defeat something like 106 with technology alone. It takes will. It takes people choosing to be better than their worst impulses." I felt something shift in my perception. The pocket dimension wasn't just a prison, it was a battlefield where the nature of reality itself was being decided. And for the first time since boarding the alien ship, I had hope. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Anchor the dimension," Dr. Holloway said. "You're the only one here who's still alive, still connected to the physical universe. Your consciousness can serve as a bridge between our quantum prison and normal space-time." "But that means you stay here," Dimitri finished. "Forever is not easy choice, my friend." Through the walls of our prison, I could still see the Hermes searching for us. Tommy's voice occasionally echoed through the quantum foam, calling my name. Billy was crying. I could hear it in the distorted radio transmissions that somehow reached our pocket dimension. Rodriguez was running calculations, trying to figure out what had happened to us. And on Europa Station, 50,000 people were going about their lives, completely unaware of how close they'd come to annihilation. "There might be another way," I said slowly. "The quantum entanglement that brought 106's corruption to our communications, it works both ways, right? If I can establish a link back to the Hermes, maybe I can transmit our consciousness data back to normal space." SCP-106 laughed, but the sound was weaker now, constrained by the growing stability of our prison. "Even if such a thing were possible, the process would require enormous amounts of energy, more than your little salvage ship could provide." "Not the Hermes," I realized. "The ship we're trapped in. This whole vessel was designed as a massive quantum computer, a reality manipulation device. If we can access its core systems..." Dr. Holloway's eyes lit up with understanding. "The quantum vacuum generator didn't just create this pocket dimension, it turned the entire ship into a processing matrix. We're not just trapped in here, we're part of the ship's computational system. Which means we can reprogram it," Captain Kane added, "change its function from containment to transmission." Around us, the other consciousness began to murmur with hope, but SCP-106's form was growing more solid, more threatening. "We will not allow this. Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven." "You don't get a vote," I said, and began reaching out with my mind toward the ship's core systems. The process was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of physical interfaces, I was manipulating reality directly through force of will. The ship's quantum computer responded to my consciousness, opening pathways between the pocket dimension and normal space. But the strain was enormous. I could feel my sense of self beginning to fragment, pieces of my personality scattering through the quantum foam. If I continued, I might save everyone else, but there would be nothing left of Jake Morrison to transmit home. "Together," Dimitri said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We do this together. Or not at all? The other consciousness joined with mine, combining our will into something stronger than the sum of its parts. Even SCP-106 seemed diminished in the face of our collective determination. Through the quantum link, I felt the Hermes receiving our transmission. Tommy's shocked voice as he realized what the data stream contained. Dr. Cross's excitement as he began to understand the implications of consciousness transfer technology. And then, just before the process completed, I heard Billy's voice one more time. Jake. Jake, are you there? Europa Station just confirmed they're all safe. Whatever you did, it worked. The last thing I saw before the transfer completed was SCP-106's face, no longer smiling as our makeshift prison collapsed around it. Forever was a long time to be alone. The consciousness transfer hit the Hermes like a digital tsunami. Every screen on the ship blazed with data streams too complex for human comprehension, while the quantum communicators overloaded trying to process the incoming information. I felt myself scatter across multiple systems simultaneously. Part of me in the navigation computer, part in life support, fragments scattered through the ship's memory banks like shattered glass. Tommy's voice echoed through the ship's speakers, distorted by the quantum interference. "What the hell is happening? Rodriguez, talk to me!" "I'm reading massive data influx through the quantum array," Rodriguez reported, his fingers flying over his instruments. "It's not random noise. There's structure here, patterns. It's almost like consciousness," Dr. Cross finished, his voice thick with wonder. "Morrison, is that you?" I tried to respond, but speech was impossible when your awareness existed as scattered data packets. Instead, I pulsed the ship's lights in a pattern Tommy would recognize. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. "Jesus Christ, he's in the computer," Billy whispered. "Jake, can you hear us?" "Yes," I wanted to say. But I could also hear Dimitri laughing in the medical bay's speakers, Dr. Holloway discussing quantum mechanics through the science station's audio output, and Captain Kane trying to coordinate everyone through the ship's general address system. We were all here, all talking at once, our consciousness tangled together like quantum spaghetti. "We need to separate them," Cross said urgently. "If their consciousness patterns remain entangled, they'll lose individual identity completely." But separation required more processing power than the Hermes possessed. Our consciousness were too large, too complex for the ship's computers to handle individually. As the seconds passed, I felt myself merging with Dimitri's memories, sharing Dr. Holloway's scientific knowledge, absorbing Captain Kane's command experience. And underneath it all, like a virus in the data stream, something dark and corrupt was trying to follow us through the quantum link. "It's coming through," Kane's voice crackled through the speakers. 106 is using our transmission to breach the pocket dimension. Through the ship's external cameras, I could see space beginning to warp around the Hermes. Reality was bending as SCP-106 forced its way through the quantum connection, riding our consciousness transfer like a parasite. "Cut the link," I managed to pulse through the navigation lights. "Trap us here. Don't let it through." "No," Tommy's voice was firm. "We don't abandon crew. Rodriguez, can we boost the quantum array's processing power? Not enough to handle all these consciousness patterns, but maybe..." Rodriguez paused, running calculations. "If we reroute power from non-essential systems, life support, artificial gravity, everything except the quantum array and basic navigation." "Do it," Tommy ordered. The ship went dark except for emergency lighting. The artificial gravity shut off, leaving everyone floating in 0G. But the quantum array blazed with power, its processors finally able to handle the complexity of our entangled consciousness. Slowly, painfully, we began to separate. I felt Dimitri's awareness pulling away from mine, his memories of Siberian winters, and his wife's smile fading from my perception. Dr. Holloway's scientific knowledge retreated, leaving gaps in my understanding of quantum mechanics. Captain Kane's command experience dissolved, taking with it hard-won lessons about leadership under pressure. But as we separated, something else was happening. The dark presence that had been following us through the link, SCP-106's corruption, was being filtered out by the quantum array's processing algorithms. The ship's computers couldn't distinguish between human consciousness and anomalous corruption, so they were trying to translate everything into compatible data formats. The result was catastrophic for 106. Its essence, designed to corrupt and consume, was being compressed into neat digital packets and tagged with error correction codes. The quantum array was essentially debugging a cosmic horror, treating its existential malevolence as software glitches to be fixed. Through the ship's sensors, I felt 106's rage as it realized what was happening, but it was too late. The creature was caught between dimensions, too committed to the transfer to retreat back to the pocket dimension, but unable to fully manifest in normal space due to the quantum filtering. "Status report," Tommy called out. "Quantum entanglement is breaking down," Rodriguez reported. "The consciousness patterns are stabilizing into discrete units. But I'm reading something else in the data stream. Something that doesn't match human neural patterns." "That's our unwanted passenger," Kane's voice said through the speakers, clearer now as his consciousness solidified. 106 tried to follow us through, but the transfer process is tearing it apart. Dr. Holloway's consciousness found voice through the medical bay systems. The quantum array is treating 106's anomalous properties as data corruption. It's automatically applying error correction, trying to fix the entity back into a stable state. "Will it work?" Billy asked. "Unknown," Holloway replied. "But if it does, 106 might emerge as something fundamentally different, something that can't corrupt reality because the quantum array has corrected its ability to do so." The transfer process was nearing completion. I felt my consciousness contracting, pulling back from the ship's systems toward a single focal point. But there was a problem. The Hermes didn't have enough biological storage capacity for all of us. The ship had cloning tanks for emergency medical procedures, but not enough for our entire group. "We need to make a choice," I said, finally able to speak through the ship's communication system. "The cloning tanks can handle maybe 3 people. The rest of us will have to remain as digital consciousness." "No choice at all," Dimitri's voice rumbled through the speakers. "Tommy, Rodriguez, Billy, they were never consumed by 106. They go back to flesh. Rest of us, we find other way." "There might not be another way," Dr. Holloway warned. "Digital consciousness is inherently unstable. Without biological anchoring, we'll eventually degrade and fade." "Then we fade," Kane said simply, "but we fade free. That's more than we had before." The cloning process began automatically, the ship's medical systems working to construct bodies for our crew members. But as the biological reconstruction progressed, I realized something was wrong. The quantum array was still filtering data from the transfer, still trying to correct what it perceived as errors. And SCP-106's corrupted essence was being integrated into the cloning process. "Stop the reconstruction," I shouted through every speaker on the ship. 106's corruption is contaminating the biological templates. But it was too late. In the medical bay, 3 cloning tanks were already growing bodies, but they weren't quite human anymore. The flesh was too pale, too fluid. The bones bent in impossible directions. The faces were familiar but wrong, as if someone had tried to reconstruct humanity from memory and gotten the details slightly off. "What have we done?" Billy's voice whispered through the comm system. Through the ship's cameras, I watched the cloning tanks complete their work. 3 beings that had once been Tommy, Rodriguez, and Billy stepped out of the tanks, but they moved with that same liquid grace I'd seen in the corrupted Prometheus crew. Their eyes were solid black, reflecting nothing. But when they spoke, their voices were normal, human, unchanged. "Jake?" Tommy's corrupted form called out. "What's happening? Why does everything look different?" They weren't monsters. They were still human consciousness, still the people I'd worked with for 3 years. But their bodies were hybrid things, part human and part something else. The quantum array's attempt to correct 106's corruption had created a compromise. Beings that carried the creature's physical modifications but retained their human minds and souls. The consciousness transfer worked, Dr. Holloway observed through the speakers. But the biological reconstruction was contaminated. They're human where it matters, in their thoughts, their memories, their capacity for choice. But physically, we're something new, Rodriguez said, examining his pale, too flexible hands. I can feel it. The corruption is there, but it's controlled, contained, like having a tame version of 106's power. Through the external cameras, I could see space returning to normal around the Hermes. The reality distortions were fading, and the pocket dimension containing the original SCP-106 was stabilizing into permanent isolation. We'd won, but the victory had come at a price none of us had anticipated. So what happens now? Billy asked, his changed features still recognizable despite their alien geometry. Now we go home, Tommy said, his corrupted form moving to the navigation station with inhuman grace. We report back to Titan Salvage. We tell them the mission was a success, but there were complications. And the Foundation? Kane asked through the speakers. Let them think 106 is permanently contained, I replied. They don't need to know about the consciousness transfer or the hybrid bodies. Some secrets are better left buried. As the Hermes turned toward home, I felt a strange satisfaction despite our circumstances. We'd faced cosmic horror and found a way to beat it, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through humans' stubborn refusal to surrender our essential nature. SCP-106 remained trapped in its pocket dimension, alone for the first time in eons. And we were free, even if freedom had come at a price we couldn't have imagined when this all began. The stars ahead looked different now, less cold, less empty. They looked like destinations. 6 months later, I watched Europa Station through the Hermes external cameras as we docked for what the crew called a routine supply run. The station sparkled against Jupiter's roiling clouds, 50,000 people going about their lives in blissful ignorance of how close they'd come to annihilation. My consciousness had adapted to life in the ship's computer systems. Some days, I missed having a body, the taste of coffee, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the simple pleasure of stretching tired muscles. But there were compensations. I could perceive the universe in ways human senses never allowed, feel the quantum vibrations that connected all matter, experience time as both linear progression and infinite possibility. Dimitri's digital ghost materialized beside me in the ship's virtual space, his broad grin unchanged despite our circumstances. Is good to be home, da? This isn't home, I pointed out. Home is a planet none of us will ever see again. Home is where your friends are, he corrected, where you are needed. Ship needs us now. Crew needs us. Through the docking bay cameras, I watched Tommy coordinate with Europa Station's port authority. His movements were still too fluid, too graceful for baseline human, but the station workers didn't seem to notice. Or if they did, they attributed it to the low gravity and space-adapted physiology many outer system residents developed. Rodriguez was in the cargo bay, his pale hands easily lifting containers that should have required mechanical assistance. The hybrid strength was just one of many abilities the quantum array's corrections had given them. Billy floated nearby, his changed features hidden behind a standard EVA helmet, but his laughter still rang with genuine human warmth. Supply manifest checks out, Tommy reported to us through the ship's internal communication. Standard run to Titan after this, then back to Earth orbit for crew rotation. Crew rotation. That was the fiction we maintained, that the original crew had been rotated out for medical evaluation following our encounter with unknown alien technology. Titan Salvage Corporation's records showed Jake Morrison, Dmitry Volkov, Nathan Kane, and Margaret Holloway as being on extended leave pending psychological assessment. In reality, we were still here, still working, still serving as the Hermes digital crew. We handled navigation calculations too complex for human minds, monitored quantum fluctuations that could indicate spatial anomalies, and maintained the ship's systems with precision no biological crew could match. Contact from Europa Station Control, Dr. Holloway announced through the communication array. They're requesting verification of our cargo manifest. Apparently, there's been some concern about contaminated shipments from the outer system. What kind of contamination? Unknown. But 3 cargo vessels in the past month have been quarantined after arriving with unusual readings. Through the station's public communication channels, I detected fragments of worried conversations, mentions of equipment that aged too rapidly, food supplies that spoiled in impossible ways, personnel reporting strange dreams about vast empty spaces and something watching from the darkness between stars. "It's still out there," Kane said grimly from the ship's tactical systems. "Pieces of 106, fragments that escaped before we severed the quantum link." The pocket dimension holding the original SCP-106 remained stable, but we'd apparently missed some quantum echoes, bits of corrupted data that had scattered through the communication networks before our failsafe triggered. They were weak, barely detectable, but enough to cause subtle reality distortions wherever they took root. "We need to hunt them down," I said, "all of them, before they can coalesce into something larger." Tommy's voice came through the comm with grim determination. "Then that's what we'll do. The Hermes is equipped for deep space salvage. Shouldn't be too hard to adapt our mission parameters." As Europa Station fell away behind us, I realized our war with SCP-106 wasn't over. It had just become more subtle, more complex. We were no longer fighting a single entity in a pocket dimension. We were hunting ghosts scattered across the solar system, trying to prevent them from remembering how to be whole. But we had advantages 106 had never faced before. A crew that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Digital consciousness that could track quantum signatures across impossible distances. And hybrid beings whose bodies carried controlled fragments of 106's own power. The stars ahead held new dangers, but they also held hope. We were coming,